Welcome to Jackal DIY and Tech. In this video, if you followed along, I will take apart, I already have taken apart a power supply similar to this one, just a lot smaller. It's an SFX, as you can see it's tiny, and it also has a tiny fan, which is loud. So I want to fix it, if possible, by replacing it with this one. As you can see, I will have an issue as it is higher, so I will need to make some modifications. But before I do, I actually want to test how loud is this fan and how loud this fan will be also while it is encased. Both fans are 12 volts DC, so let me set up 12 volts, so 11.9, 8, that's okay. Plug in the positive and then the negative and see how loud it gets, because the power supply is running the fan at 12 volts and this fan is wham! Never heard of them, so don't expect much. Now I don't know if the camera microphone picked something up, and it is about 40 centimeters away from the fan. And what I'll do now is simply unscrew the screws and replace the fans and see how that one will sound. It does sound quieter, but that is because it's not mounted to the casing. So maybe this will affect how it sounds. As for the power supply, it's Unica CH, I think this is for Czech Republic. It's a 450 watt SFX power supply. Nothing special, it's the cheapest one I could find for a cheap PC build. As you can see, a tiny fan. I did also take the sticker off previously, but everything is just glued in place. As for the fan dimensions, that one was 92 millimeters and 15 millimeter height, and this one is 25 millimeter height, so I somehow have to make space for 1 centimeter. So this fan is in, let's test this one out. Now the fan definitely is quiet, but the whole casing would have to be firmly screwed in place, otherwise there is an annoying frequency. But this fan is PWM controlled, as you can see, so I don't need to connect it directly to the power supply. I could just as well connect it to the motherboard. So this was surprisingly a quick mod that I could do, and as you can see, the power supply is still inside this case. I did not disconnect anything, well, apart from the power. Why was this mod quick? Well, because the casing is really soft, as you can see. I could bend this by hand, and I put some plasticky-like stuff in between, just so that the metal, when I tightened the screws down, didn't bend too much. As you can see, I also left this 4-pin connector intact. It should be long enough so that it reaches the bottom of this case, because the power supply, let's see, did I orientate it correctly? I did not. This connector will have to come down this way. I will do that later. What I want to do is simply test out the fan, how it sounds like when it will be inside the case and it will be orientated in this way. So let me simply hook it up to the power supply, the testing one. So again, I will set 12 volts, 11.8, just as before. Now in my opinion the fan is a lot quieter than this one, wham one, and I will still be able to connect this fan to the PWM signal. Now this board only has one, but that is good enough because I don't use any chassis fan at the moment, but even if I do, I can use a Y splitter to connect both this fan and maybe this one. Let me zoom out a little bit. So this would be the intake fan if I need it, so I can connect this one and this one to the same one using a Y splitter and setting the PWM signal in the BIOS. The only question that I have now is if I'll actually be able to get this back inside. So I managed to do this mod quite easily and a lot quicker than I actually anticipated. And I just went with the flow and keeping it simple. What you will need if you use the same kind of power supply and use a higher fan than initially inside, you will need longer screws. These were the ones that came with the power supply, and luckily I had some on hand that were longer and fit right in. That's one thing. The other one, well, currently this is the PWM signal. I have not made any changes, so it will run with the defaults that were set in the BIOS. The other major change that I've done is I previously had an SSD right here behind the power supply. I couldn't really get to it and the cables were also in the way, so I moved it down here. So the SSD was behind the power supply. Won't really be visible because it's quite dark, and now I've just put it behind the cables, and I think that is basically it. All that I need to do now is turn on the power supply and let's see what it will do. I do see the fan spinning, both of them. Both of them quite quiet. Then the way I have this PC configured is that it will try to connect to a website where I watch the TV. Well, normal TV or the IPTV, you can log in and watch it on the PC. And it goes immediately into full screen, so you can't access it besides using a keyboard and using Alt F4. Now I'm in the desktop. The fan of this unit is quite quiet. I could go into the BIOS and let me do just that quickly. So restore the PC. I'll go into the BIOS and see what the fan is set to. It could be set to DC, so 12 volt constant, or it could be set to PWM signal, in which case I will have to set something reasonable, be it the CPU temperature or the system. And also, I didn't mention it, but if you make this mod, don't play with the power supply disconnected. You can leave it disconnected for a week, even more if you want, because the capacitors, if you're not careful, can give you a pretty nasty shock, if you're lucky that is. Otherwise, well, you won't be there to see it. So let's go to the advanced mode. I'm on the bottom right, so advanced mode or F7. Go to monitor, Q fan configuration. We have the CPU fan profile, which is set to standard. I could also go with silent. So maybe I'll go with silent, and as for the chassis fan, it is set to auto detect. So we can use DC mode or the PWM mode. So we can use the PWM mode, so it's not set to auto. We could also set this to silent, and the chassis fan Q fan source is either the CPU, motherboard, or we can use multiple sources. So in this case the CPU and the motherboard, but I don't expect the motherboard to get hot. But maybe the power supply does need a little bit more oomph. So let's see if I set this to DC mode. So this is not DC mode. If I use maybe full speed, so this is the full speed, and I doubt that it needs the full speed, and it is quite loud. Maybe I can set the low limit to 600 RPM, that should be good. But I can always set this to manual and specify the temperatures and how fast the fan should move. So let's see, maybe I can go with 50% with minimum duty cycle. Maybe 70 is a bit too much. Let's go with 60. I think I'll just go with 50 at the minimum. That should be it. And I believe this fan is a lot better than the one that was in. So even if it is running at 50% constantly at the minimum, it should be okay. So let's save the changes. And that should be it. I do think the power supply is now a lot quieter, but I will still have to test it out once I'm actually in the room and watching some of the TV. That's it for this video, and we'll do something else in the next one.